Assassin's Creed Odyssey is a bad video game. It completely dumbfounds me to this day that this title was able to get so much critical acclaim while being a product of such low quality, and I'm not exaggerating in any sense. Assassin's Creed Odyssey is a disgrace to anything, and really a disgrace to anything that Assassin's Creed has ever developed. And understand that I am not angry about Assassin's Creed being a bad game because Odyssey, Origins and Valhalla chose to move away from the roots and the style that made the Assassin's Creed game series so popular in the first place. No, I have beef with Assassin's Creed Odyssey particularly because it's a low quality video game. Instead of prioritizing quality, they prioritized quantity, and this aspect is definitely carried out throughout the entire experience. Let's get right into the review, and I'll break down every single relevant aspect, why Assassin's Creed is a bad game and why its critical acclaim is completely undeserved. Let's get right into the video, gents. Now, before we get into the subsequent categories that I usually get into regarding my patient gamer reviews, I want us to have just a little bit of a discussion and determine what is the most important aspect of that makes an Assassin's Creed a high quality video game experience. Is it the gameplay? Is it the story? Is it the environment? What category would you put above everything else? I would actually mix it up and put it and make it two particular aspects more than anything. The gameplay of Assassin's Creed has definitely been more so on the basic side over the many years. Even the critically acclaimed, the well-loved by every single fan of Assassin's Creed, the Ezio trilogy, the gameplay was definitely much more on the bare-bones side. The stealth combat definitely was interesting, and you were able to use the environment to your advantage pretty well, but the head-to-head gameplay, the one-on-one, the multifaceted gameplay was definitely more so on the bare-bones side. I would argue the thing that made Assassin's Creed games quite special was actually the mission design, the story, and the mission execution, and that being mixed together in one smooth and silky interesting mix. The main missions that you went on, playing as Ezio or Altair or whoever your favorite assassin was in the series, I'd say doing those missions was definitely the most interesting thing. Even if the story or the plot itself wasn't extremely engaging, the missions that you went on that were linear in style, even though the world is open world, but the main missions were linear in style, you'd go to unique environments, doing unique things, trying to defeat your targets. If you don't believe me in this aspect, I simply ask you to cast your mind back to Assassin's Creed Black Flag. Black Flag definitely does not have the strongest narrative experience at all, but the mission designs, the freedom, the gameplay was definitely extremely engaging, and of course the naval combat and you being able to be a pirate made the experience very special. But the main missions that you would go on would be very interesting. As you go on, you go for your targets, you get information, you eavesdrop, you do a whole lot of things, and those main story missions were definitely very interesting. And I'll be honest, even the side content was actually pretty decent, with you being able to do assassination requests that would give you a decent amount of coin on the back end. Definitely very interesting, despite the plot itself not being extremely strong in compared to the other Assassin's Creed games we had before. So we've gotten to some sort of a conclusion or middle ground. The most interesting parts, in my personal opinion, would be the way that the main story missions are executed, compounded that with the quality of the gameplay and the other things that the game puts together. Assassin's Creed Odyssey fails completely in this division. I'm going to break this down piece by piece as we usually do with these categories, and I'll explain throughout why I think Assassin's Creed Odyssey loses all of its charm because of the decisions they choose to make, particularly in this department. I'm going to start right off with the story. I'd say the story is decent enough, it's compelling enough, it has a very interesting premise as you're playing as Leonidas of Sparta, and it's a very interesting and bombastic intro is you follow the child and you eventually grow up and you're this cool and interesting mercenary. The story itself is decent enough, but the way that the game interacts and makes you interact with the story is extremely important, and that's why it's very co-linked with the gameplay to a very, very high level. I don't usually do this, but I'm going to mix the two categories of the story and the gameplay, and particularly how they interlock with each other, because this is where Assassin's Creed Odyssey completely fails and loses the plot. The cutscenes are interesting and well done, and the story is actually decently serviceable. The issue is how the missions are executed, the mission design or lack thereof. The only difference between you doing a main story mission in Assassin's Creed Odyssey and you completing or taking over a fort during a side quest is that in the beginning of the mission there's a cutscene, and at the end of the mission there's a cutscene. That's essentially the difference. But there is usually nothing inherently unique of when you are doing a main story quest, which is completely preposterous. Now, there definitely are times where you go to particularly unique areas in the map that you cannot revisit, but that alone is not always going to be enough to keep the story or things happening quite engaging. The mission design needs to be special. The things that you do and achieve in the main story needs to feel inherently different from the side content. There are many main story missions that I did in Assassin's Creed Odyssey over the 100 hours I think I did to try and complete that game that felt exactly the same as side content. The only difference is that I'm picking up a main story content item and inside the fort, and the difference is that there would be a cutscene and a little bit more coin at the end of the journey. But at the end of the day, I'm still doing the exact same thing I'll be doing if I were doing some side content. That's a big issue. That is a huge issue. If I am not able to feel any sort of substantial diversity between me doing a side quest and me doing a main story quest, that is the definition of failure. Like, what is going on over here, bro? If I feel like I'm doing side content while I'm doing a main story mission, we have a huge issue. Now, the cutscenes themselves, they're executed decently well, but if I feel no substantial difference between what I'm doing, like, everything just feels like a blur. Main story missions are supposed to be the cream, the cherry on top, the thing that makes the experience oh so special. But if everything feels oh so damn homogeneous, that's a complete utter disappointment. And unfortunately, homogeneous is unfortunately a word I'd use to associate with the entire game as a whole. Now, let's focus on the gameplay a little bit more directly and consider it. Assassin's Creed, I've always had some issues with it because the head-on-head, the one-on-one combat, the straight-up combat has always been a little bit of hot and cold. But in this case, it definitely is improved upon, but because they chose to go for a more RPG approach, unfortunately the combat is a lot jankier and it doesn't look as silky smooth as it was in the previous titles. It seems they've inherited the many issues that RPG games have also had of them having very janky and not very satisfying combat in comparison to action-adventure games, and making the switch then also inherited some of those sins as well, which was a little bit odd. But nevertheless, I would definitely still say, even though it was quite janky and not as amazing as others, the sheer amount of abilities and cool things you can do throughout the entire game definitely do kind of make up for that. And compared to previous Assassin's Creed games, I'd definitely say, yeah, this is actually slightly a better combat system and combat model than we've had before. Unfortunately, the loot itself is not that great. It's definitely more of a quantity over quality type thing. There's far too much loot provided to you at too high of a rate. There's too much loot being tossed to you and that you can pick up. You'll be chopping and changing your gear multiple times. You'll pick up a legendary item, and after playing for about 2 hours, you would have already tossed that to the wayside because you found a weapon that does more damage, more speed, or more environmental or whatever damage it does. You would have tossed it to the wayside, and it's really quite expensive for you to keep upgrading your weapons, do your legendary weapons, so they stay relevant. You level up a little bit too much and it makes too much of your gear too irrelevant far too quickly. Assassin's Creed Odyssey definitely would have benefited from having a much more humble gear system, a much more humble leveling, not necessarily a leveling up system, but the amount of loot there being a whole lot less of it and it being a lot more substantial. If I find a legendary piece of gear for the next couple of hours, 10 hours, I'm going to be holding on to that piece of gear because I'm not going to come across anything that's better in it in any way. But regardless, the gameplay is alright. I definitely am not going to put too much flack on the gear right there, but I'd say the game falters in a lot of other areas a whole lot more, not in the gameplay department. Oh, and honestly, these microtransactions too, bro. Like, are you serious, dude? Time savers? This is an insult to the customer and to the developers themselves. They don't trust their own product enough for players to spend enough time to grind and level up and actually enjoy the game. Depending on the game, you'd be like, oh geez, there's more content for me to play, I'm so excited. Ubisoft thinks, nah, let's give them time savers so they can play the game less. Bro, what? Are you serious? You're going to implement a game mechanic that is going to encourage the people that have purchased your game to play the game less? Bro, this has got to be the biggest insults to the customer, the biggest insults to the skills and the competence of these developers. Absolutely ridiculous, bro. Integrity is completely lacking. These guys don't respect our time. You're essentially telling us, bro, you're wasting your time. You should be playing another video game, because spending even a minute of your time on the side content of Assassin's Creed Odyssey is a complete and utter waste of time. That maybe you should try this microtransaction so you can actually spend time doing the interesting stuff, which is arguable if you can even call that stuff interesting in any sense. Goodness me, bro. This is just a simple way and a few things that a lot of games just don't respect the time of the consumer. You're wasting our time making us trek all over. You're wasting our time making us grind doing this boring and mindless side content. Bro, come on, man. Ooh, doggy. I'd say this is probably the section that shows to you that Assassin's Creed has definitely completely lost the plot, and they still to this day do not understand how gamers work and what gamers truly want when they want a high quality gaming experience. Let's consider the world. As I've mentioned before, homogeneous, quantity over quality are statements and phrases and words that I would use to describe Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and they do this to the absolutely highest level. The map and the world of Assassin's Creed is absolutely huge. It's to this day probably still the largest open world game that I've absolutely ever played in. It looks absolutely gorgeous, but at what cost? I come back to the word homogeny. Everything and every place that you go to looks exactly the same. So when you establish and find a brand new island, chances are you've already seen everything before. You've seen that tree before, you've seen that animal before, you've seen that building before, because it's been copied and pasted to 10 or 20 different locations. So when you go to a new piece of architecture and see this brand new building, okay, I've seen this a couple of times before. So it's going to a new place and exploration, which is a testament of open world gameplay. Exploration is no longer exciting if you know wherever you go is not going to be unique, interesting, or exciting in any sense. And that is a complete failure. The thing is what is even more frustrating is that the world is so unnecessarily big that traveling from point A to point B actually ends up being frustrating to you as the player. I remember this so many times because I know going from point A to point B is not only going to be boring, as it's quite homogeneous and I've already seen all of this dry and boring countryside before, but the motion of traveling, me there on my horse, is quite boring. I'm not going to see anything interesting. I'm not going to see anything unique. I'm not going to have any specific encounter that is going to be memorable forever. None of that is going to happen, and more so, I'm annoyed at how far away my objective is from me. Frustration is what fills me instead of excitement of the world being so big. They are actually suffering from success. Ubisoft continuously flex that we have some of the biggest open worlds in all of gaming, but this is a point where they've absolutely reached diminishing returns, as the world is so big that it's to the detriment of the entire experience. I dread knowing that I have to trek 3,000 meters to go and complete my objective, then trek another 3,000 meters on my horse back so I can complete the mission. Thoroughly frustrating things, and it doesn't improve the quality of the game in any sense. This is why I keep saying, how did Assassin's Creed Odyssey get so much critical acclaim? it's leaning so much more towards the mediocre than anything else. Also considering the other aspects of the games that essentially make it up, the UI, the story, the music, all of these things. As I've mentioned before, Assassin's Creed Odyssey looks absolutely beautiful. The graphics, absolutely amazing, and in terms of performance wise, it's actually a really solid game. But this shows this is an experienced company that knows how to make a lot of games very quickly and ensures that it works on release. But whether that game is of high quality is a completely different discussion. I would definitely call Ubisoft an assembly line gaming company. All of their games, they make a huge amount of games on a daily basis and on an annual basis, but they feel exactly the same. And that's exactly what you can say about Assassin's Creed Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla. The music of Odyssey is absolutely amazing though. They were able to beautifully capture that Greek tone in their music, and that main theme resides for me for the longest time. Even though I'm not a fan of the game, that main OST is absolutely breathtaking, and it's one of my favorite gaming OSTs ever. The music is definitely cool, and during their cutscenes they definitely are able to provide you with some high quality visual spectacle. As I said, Ubisoft are very experienced at making games, so things such as UI and all of these things have been perfected, but perhaps you can argue that it's been perfected a little bit too much, as there is too much UI and too many things on screen that gives you a hint of what you need to do. But I think you are given the option to hide that, so you can have more of a explorative or more organic way of exploring. But as I said before, exploration is not well rewarded here, because you're not going to see anything of real value. You're not going to find any loot of real value. You're not going to find any vista or beauty or terrain that's of real uniqueness or value, because everything is copied and pasted in this game. Everything feels exactly the same. There isn't anything inherently unique with the entire experience, and this frustration is palpable. Just listen to how I'm speaking, bro. It has annoyed me to this day, and it still completely dumbfounds me. If you were to go over to Metacritic and look up Assassin's Creed Odyssey, you're going to see a game that is of high critical acclaim, and it is put up with one of the best games that has ever been released in the past generation. And I find it absolutely ridiculous that this is the case. Wrapping everything up, the story is definitely alright, it's serviceable, but it definitely takes you a little bit too long for you to reach the ultimate climax. The game definitely does drag on for a little bit too long, and as I mentioned before, you trekking and traversing, because that's not fun at all, and it takes you a very long time for you to go from one destination to the next. That is part of the reason as well that the game even takes a whole lot longer. You do a whole lot of side activities that impede you on completing the main story, and you do a whole lot of things that really are just unimportant and just drag the story on for far too long. It's alright, but it's definitely nothing crazy, and it's not a story that you're going to keep coming back to. Perhaps you'll go on YouTube to see the multiple various ending choices that you had available to you, but yeah, I only replayed the game because I wanted to make a significantly different choice than I had made, and I realized that I didn't have any saves before, and I ended up playing it for like a second time. So I pretty much have played Assassin's Creed Odyssey maybe 1.5 times, no, two times. I've played it 2 times just so I could see that different ending again. So because of that, I'd say I definitely have a substantial amount of understanding of how different and how much AC Odyssey really has to offer. And really, bro, it wasn't worth going back to play it for a second time. It really wasn't worth it, man. Nah. Now let's head on over to the value section that is also important for you as a patient gamer. Now, this definitely depends on perspective. In most cases, I would definitely say that it's quality over quantity. I'd rather have a much shorter game experience than to have a lot of game, but it being of such mediocre and middling quality. And that's definitely the stance that I have with Assassin's Creed Odyssey. You're going to get a huge amount of hours if you play Assassin's Creed Odyssey. And if you have no other game that you're interested in playing in, Odyssey is the only game you're going to be buying this year, and you're just looking for a game that's going to keep you busy for an extremely long duration of time, then Assassin's Creed Odyssey is the game for you. There's a lot of content here for you, and that's what they advertise and that's what they deliver on. there is a huge amount of content here for your disposal, and you're not going to be disappointed in that sense in any way. Huge amount of content, but it's definitely low quality content, which is the big issue. You're going to get over 100 hours, and for me personally, I made the more so intelligent decision and got I think the complete edition or Game of the Year edition, whatever edition it was, but it included all of the DLC available to me, and because of that I was able to get the multiple DLC packages. But even though, despite that, I finished the main story, but I wasn't able to actually finish all of the DLC packages because of how tedious and how boring it was. So much of the main story content felt like busy work, bro. So much like busy work. And this DLC looked so cool because they put you into completely brand new maps, and these brand new maps look absolutely drop dead gorgeous. The vistas look amazing. AC Odyssey, as I said, graphically looks amazing, and the artwork, these guys went above and beyond. But if there's no substance to it, I'm walking through a canvas that simply lacks any substance. I don't want to spend any time or substantial time there. Is it really even worth it? The answer to that, in my opinion, is no. You can spend sink a huge amount of hours here, but it's all forgettable. None of the time that I've spent in the world of Assassin's Creed Odyssey is going to be memorable to me. Maybe a few rare cases and the OST and the beauty of it, but nothing really else stands out to me, and I think that's a huge disappointment on their part. And I think as developers, they would feel disappointed as well that they weren't able to evoke any form of emotion when I think of Assassin's Creed Odyssey as a game. Let's head on over to how long to beat and consider how much gameplay time you're going to get on average if you were to play this title. Now, I've definitely ripped this game a brand new hole with all the criticism that I've given it. But in terms of gameplay time, this isn't a facet of the game that you're going to be disappointed in at all. If you head on over to how long to beat, it shows you that you'll be able to get on average about 45 hours of gameplay time if you pretty much focus on the main story and level your character up enough so you can continue completing those main story missions. If you interact quite in-depthly with the side content, you get about 84 hours. And if of course you're one of those crazy completionists, you'll get 142 hours of content. Now, if you're someone, I would recommend rather you do a little bit of a mix. Do a little bit of the side content so you can level up your guy, do the main story content, and then sink a little bit more time into the DLC. I would definitely average, you'd probably get about 100 hours. If you do quite a large amount of the DLC, you do have to interact with that world quite a bit, and now you'll get a decent amount of playtime. Now, this is the part that I usually get to where I talk and show you the various prices that you can pick up this title for. Now, this is what I want you guys to remember and keep quite plainly in your mind. I am not recommending that you purchase this game at all. That's part of the reason I'm even making this video at all. It's to talk about my multiple grievances that I've had about this title for the past couple of years. If you are still stubborn and you still want to play Assassin's Creed Odyssey, I would recommend the only two places that you play it from is either from Game Pass, a Ubisoft subscription package, or PlayStation Plus. Those are the only ways I would recommend you even touch or come near any of these AC games, these newer ones, this AC Odyssey. That's the only way I would recommend you pick this up so you can actually play the full game for yourself and not be hurting your wallet in any sense. I definitely still can't recommend this title, but if you're someone who still wants to see what all the fuss is about, those would be the only way I would recommend you to do that. As I mentioned before, this game is filled and riddled with content, but that quality leaves much to be desired. If I want to give Assassin's Creed Odyssey a complete rating, I actually do have to give it a 5 out of 10. And some people may argue, I've identified AC Odyssey as a bad video game. How am I giving it a 5 out of 10, which is generally considered as average? Now note this. While Assassin's Creed, in my opinion, is not a great game and it thoroughly frustrates me by the end of it all, everything still works as intended. As I said before, Ubisoft are very well experienced and well versed in creating video games from a template that they've already created. AC Odyssey works fine and everything works as intended. This is still a AAA video game. A huge amount of time, money and attention has been synced into this title. Despite all of that, it is still painstakingly mediocre, and that's the problem with it. Ubisoft have such interesting concepts on such a regular basis, and they're able to excite people using their trailers, but when the game finally comes out, it lacks substance, it lacks passion, and as I said before, it feels like another assembly line project that has been taken out and churned out of the assembly line from a tired employee base, developers who no longer have passion for their projects, developers who have been pushed down. The creativity has been squeezed out of these people so they can continue to make money for the various shareholders that are part of Ubisoft. There is no love, passion in these games, and blandness is how I would describe Ubisoft in these days. Disappointing. Assassin's Creed Mirage is going to be coming out quite soon. I think before the end of this year we'll know what that game is going to be looking like. And it's a bit ridiculous that people are excited for that game because they're going back to their roots. This shouldn't really be exciting to anyone because they're going back to what we're used to, how Assassin's Creed used to be, the style, the assassinations, and everything that we're used to seeing from an AC game. So for me personally, I'm not really excited at all. You know, never look surprised because we used to this. Like, really, bro? Like, this is the same issue we've been dealing with for the longest. This is like the Ezio trilogy gameplay back again, but because we've been served a different piece of pie for a couple of years, they think we've already forgotten the formula. No, I don't know, but I think Ubisoft completely needs to abandon Assassin's Creed and go for something different. Use a different gameplay style, start from the ground up and make something completely brand new, because going with this tried and tested method is getting old really, really quick, to the point that most people don't even care when Ubisoft releases a game, bro. I'll maybe play an Ubisoft game these days is if it's available on Game Pass or if it's available on PlayStation Plus. Other than that, I genuinely don't see myself ever buying a brand new Ubisoft game ever again. I've been burnt a couple of times and I've learned my lesson. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, bro. Shame on me. Like, the hell is wrong with the customer? And that's the thing. Too many people aren't voting with their wallet, and that's why Ubisoft continues to be a resounding success. Assassin's Creed Odyssey is not a good video game on any standard. I don't know what the critics were smoking when they were rating these games 9 out of 10, 8 out of 10. Odyssey is amazing, this and that, when it's such mediocre content. What is going on? What is going on? Hopefully Ubisoft is able to change one day and perhaps put their energy and attention into a brand new IP that's actually exciting for the developers themselves and the customers. I'm tired of Ubisoft games being so homogenous throughout their different titles, from Splinter Cell, from Ghost Recon, from Far Cry, from Assassin's Creed. Your games can't all feel the bloody same, guys. Change is needed, and I hope that change comes sooner rather than later, before the gaming community completely abandons them. Because I'll be honest, Ubisoft just seems to be a casual gamer heaven right now. If you're a hardcore gamer, Ubisoft is far, and I mean far, from being your favorite gaming company. Well guys, those are my thoughts on Assassin's Creed. Tell me your thoughts down there in the comments. Do you agree or do you disagree? Do you think I'm wilding a wee bit? But I've needed to get this off my chest for a very long period of time, because I remember playing through AC Odyssey and I was like, bro, this is trash. How is it getting so much critical acclaim? And I'll be honest, some of that critical acclaim is part of the reason I even got this brand new Assassin's Creed again, because, you know, I gotta try it out for myself. AC's become an RPG. Let's see what they've got. Medieval RPGs are my favorite genre of games, and to see them tarnish this genre with such trash, get the hell out of here. Take it easy, gents, and tell me your thoughts down there in the comments. See you next time.